Nicola, you're nodding. Say something.
I can see and hear you. I
Okay.
can see and hear you, Sean, and it's a happy thing.
Oh, that's very good. Nice looking office, very tidy for this time of the morning. Um, hey, thank you
See
so
what it
much.
looks like when it's budget docs.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I'm just slightly upset that no Green or Labor MPs in the entire time we've been on have been managed to do what you've done right now, and that's talk to us live out of the parliamentary complex. It is budget day, Nicola. Firstly, I've painted a picture that budgets are not what they used to be. Most of this information or strategic direction's already been leaked or road tested through a focus group, hasn't it? So it's not like it used to be where the entire fate of the country and every household turned on budget day.
Well, yes and no, Sean. It's still a very important day because what we will find out today is what the next few years look like for New Zealand households. And people are struggling with the cost of living crisis right now. Inflation's through the roof. Prices are up everywhere you look. Petrol, groceries, rent, your mortgage payments, and wages aren't keeping up. The tax take has climbed ever higher. The government's spending an enormous amount of money. The books for the government still aren't in balance. The deficit is set to continue, debt's accumulating. So there are big questions for the government to answer today. They need to set out what's the pathway out of the cost of living crisis? How are we going to get New Zealand back on a path where Kiwis feel like they can get ahead again? So there is a lot riding on it, and we will be standing up for taxpayers today. We've got their back because we know a lot of them are working harder just to stand still, or in many cases, to go backwards.
Nicola, what is the one thing that will not be in this budget, the one specific thing that would be in it if National had the Treasury benches?
Tax relief. And that's because Grant Robertson thinks he can spend your money better than you can. The thing he does not like doing is letting people work for their money and hold on to it. He much prefers to take it through the tax system and then give it back to you somehow in some special way so that you can feel grateful.
Or give it to gangs, or give it to people who've committed crime in the hope that you can buy them out of nicking people's stuff.
Correct.
Nicola, when you say tax relief, who for specifically? And I know I've seen this term coming up in cartoons and online conversation, the squeezed middle. Is that middle-class New Zealanders?
Well, we're really focused on the squeezed middle. They're those New Zealanders who haven't benefited from government entitlements. They're not on a benefit. They're not getting supported by the government, but they work hard every day. But often they can't actually absorb all of these increasing costs across the economy. They're not rich enough to withstand really expensive petrol, groceries, the highest rent that we've seen that's gone up $50 a week. And they look around and they say, who's on my side? National is on their side. We've put forward a tax package which would adjust the thresholds. It would mean for your average family, they'd benefit to the tune of $1,600 a year. Now, we're the first to acknowledge that's not going to make anyone rich, but it will make a difference because when times are tough, every dollar counts, and we'd much rather see those dollars in your back pocket than going to some more comm staff at Waka Kotahi.
And that's a really, I mean, if you're looking for fundamental, as both National and Labor hunt for the middle ground electorally, if we are looking for fundamental differences, I guess it is that philosophy that the centre or centre-right believes that people are more capable of spending their own money efficiently and in their own interest than a bureaucracy is.
Yeah, that's right. We believe that people should be empowered to know that when they work hard, they can get ahead, that they will have choices about their money, that they can see pathways to become more prosperous through their own efforts and be rewarded for their own achievement. We're also sceptical of what governments do when they get a lot of money to spend and how big they can get, how wasteful they can get. And we see signs in this government of a culture of ill-disciplined spending. And you can see that whether it's the 2.75 million that was doled out to the mongrel mob to run a drug rehab program, or Kāinga Ora, who are meant to be building state houses and spent 24 million renovating their own corporate offices. We look at examples.
Well, hang
like
on,
that
I
and
missed
we-
that one. Hang on. 24
Yeah.
million to do up the office.
Yeah, so Kāinga Ora, this is the entity that's meant to be housing vulnerable New Zealanders. In fact, what's happened is the State House waiting list has grown from 6,000 to 26,000 under Labor. This is the entity that doesn't have its own houses meeting healthy home standards that the government expects of private landlords, but the government landlord's not meeting them. And yet somehow, with all of that going on, it found $24 million of taxpayer funding to spend on renovating its own corporate
That
offices.
is way worse than $220,000 to make a movie about Chloe Schwalbrook through New Zealand On Air. And even the $1 million program that Matt Tukaki transferred from one Maori entity to the other without apparently having legal authority. Well, I'll tell you, Nicola, one thing that is coming through from all the coverage and all the hot takes and all the tidbits that have clearly been leaked through the back door to friendly journalists by the Minister of Finance is that health is going to be a focus of this election, and clearly our health system has been under pressure and has been, really at the forefront of the last 2 years of dysfunction, fear, and, pandemic. You couldn't be moaning about the health system getting some more money. You're not going to oppose that, are you?
Oh, look, every year that National was in office, we increased health funding. And that's because actually New Zealanders expect good health services, and with a growing and ageing population, you do need to put more money in to ensure a good public health service. And we expect that should continue to be the case. But the question is, where do the dollars go and what results do you get for them? Because what this government is proposing to do is to spend millions upon millions restructuring the entire system and changing the way that it's organised.
That's right. Of course, they're getting rid of DHBs and everything else, aren't they?
And they're throwing it all together. But look, what we wonder is how much of that money is going to end up tied up in the backroom bureaucracy and red tape and more layers of management. And actually, is this the right time when you've got a very fatigued health workforce who've just come through the pandemic, we're feeling a lot of pressure, a number of them are striking, in fact. Is this the time to say, well, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to change the whole organisation of the system. And we really worry about that.
Yeah.
And what we will assess the health reform by is, do New Zealanders get better services?
I was just going to say, I heard Professor Des Gorman talking about this a few weeks ago, and he said, there is no point in any public service, and particularly in health, doing anything or making any change unless you are proving the absolute bottom line is that does the consumer, the patient, the taxpayer get better health care as a result of the change? And he says that's really the only empirical measure of success you can have for any reform or any dollar spent in a health system. Do you expect to see, and he also said of the current health reforms, there are no benchmarks set, there are no data points or goals to achieve. It seems to be reform just for the sake of reform.
Yeah, that's right. And that lack of data points or accountability is a real theme for this government. So one of the first things they did to the health system when they came in 2017 was got rid of the health targets which National had in place. And I don't know if you remember, but we used to report on how each DHB was doing against those targets.
And the idea of that wasn't it, that we could have a fair system where everyone had access to the same level of care as far as possible, given geographic location and population density.
That's right, but also that everyone would know that we would have transparency about what was being achieved. How long were people waiting in the emergency room? How long were they waiting for cancer care? How long were they waiting between going to see the doctor and getting a specialist appointment? So we set targets and we actually were driving improvement. We had plans to get things better. And actually, we got rid of those measures. We've dug around through the system to find out how things are actually going next to those measures. And all the evidence suggests, predictably, we've slipped backwards. So we say, look, you can do all of the reorganising you like, but unless you've got clear targets, clear accountability, a delivery plan, and you're driving for results, people aren't going to feel it. And that's what ultimately matters.
Anything else that you've heard, any little birdies have told you that's going to come up in this budget that either outrages you or will surprise and delight the taxpayer?
Well, I think something everyone should bear in mind is that Grant Robertson is still spending a lot more than he's taking in. So he is planning to have the books out of balance. He'd said that he'd get the books back into balance by 2024. He's now pushed that out a year. He said we're not going to have them back in balance till 2025. So that means that the country is going to be accumulating more debt. We'll be very interested to see what that debt forecast looks like. We'll also be looking to see, well, why is it that the books aren't in balance? Like, how big is the spend up that he's planning to do? Because let's remember, right now we do have very low unemployment. So the government isn't having to spend a lot to support people who are out of work. So there is a big question about where is all that money going? What pressure is that putting on inflation and prices? And is there any plan whatsoever to get the books back in balance?
Yeah. And he'll be wanting to keep some in reserve for next year's budget because that's election year and that's when you throw the lollies out, isn't it?
Well, I think what New Zealanders expect is that actually they can see over the next year a path that they can get their household books back in balance and that they can get ahead again. And I don't think it's good enough for the finance minister to say, look, wait another year, maybe it will get better. Actually, New Zealanders need relief now and they need better prospects now. Too many people feel like they're slipping backwards. They feel like the country's slipping backwards. The finance minister has a big repair job to do.
Nicola, just before you go, two other things I wanted to run past you as a New Zealander and as a parliamentarian. Firstly, announced rather quietly yesterday that the Ministry of Health is changing the way that it reports COVID deaths. It is now, or from now on, actually going to tell us how many people have died of COVID rather than with COVID. And as of yesterday morning, 447 people have died with COVID. And this comes on a day when mainstream media are saying we've hit the 1,000 death mark. Do you think it's a little bit late for the Ministry of Health to actually tell us the true death toll of COVID?
Oh, look, I understand that it has been complicated for health officials to work out which data they report and how they report it. I think what's really important to me is that they're transparent and they give as much information as they can, obviously without revealing private details.
Yep.
But I think people need to be able to make up their own minds on what the data means and to have access to it. Because then people can assess it for what it's worth.
Okay, but we have been basically in mainstream media over-reporting COVID deaths in this country for 2 years.
Well, obviously we've been reporting according to one definition, which was deaths with COVID, and now the ministry is going to provide that extra layer of information.
Yeah, well, some would say the real information. Look, the other thing, your mate or your colleague Simon O'Connor tried to get a piece published in the Herald in response to a piece by Shane Tapo and disgraced former unionist Shane Tapo, who of course comes from the left, and the Herald refused to publish him. So Simon, I think, did a very good post last night. Simple question for you as the relatively newly minted Deputy Leader of the National Party. Do you think you guys get a fair crack of the whip when it comes to mainstream media?
I've got a really strong view on this, Sean. It's this. When you play a game of rugby, you don't complain about the ref and the condition of the field. You just get on and you play your best game. And that's what I think we have to do as politicians. Don't sit there complaining, saying it's not fair, I can't get my story in the media, the world's against me. Get on, do the job. And you know what? I trust New Zealanders.
Do you trust the mainstream New Zealand media more to the point, though, Nicola?
Well, I think that actually increasingly people can see through some of the media. They with their own eyes and ears can see when we're not getting fair treatment, and they take that into account. And we've got a job to do too, which is to tell our stories and get our messages out directly. Social media has really helped us in that sense, that we can actually communicate directly. And we've just got to take every opportunity we can to talk to people, to listen to people, and the media is part of that.
Well, you've done it today. We might check in with you tomorrow if we get a chance as to what actually is in the budget. Any predictions on the catering? Do you think there'll be sausage rolls or what?
Well, I think that's always the bit that makes me cringe a bit. Which
Yeah,
is,
me too.
Here's this budget where you're doling out taxpayers' money. There's a lot of people doing it really tough. And you've got this room full of people eating sausage rolls and pastries.
You know what?
It's
Under this administration, it's going to be quinoa and non-meat sausage rolls, eh?
Yeah, well, I did like Bill English's tradition. He had a little personal celebration each budget day by eating a good old-fashioned pie.
Yeah.
And I think there's something in that.
All right, Nicola, thank you very much indeed for your time. That is Nicola Willis, the economic spokesperson and the deputy leader of the National Party.